And now let's talk about India. New Delhi is working on a bold plan, one that could supercharge India's Act East policy. So what's the idea? India wants to supply electricity to Southeast Asia. The plan is still in the early stages. The goal is to trade power. And how will this work? India will supply electricity. The region will be connected with power grids. Power lines will be built both on land and under the sea. There will be two hubs for distribution, Myanmar and Thailand. The power lines and grid linkages will take 4 years to complete. The talks have begun. Reports say India has held discussions at G20 meetings. Why bring this up at G20? Because it is the ideal forum to seek funding and investment for this. And which countries has India spoken to so far? Reports say discussions have happened with Singapore, Malaysia, Myanmar, Indonesia and Thailand. Like I said before, the exact plan is yet to be firmed up. These are still early days, but the idea isn't a far-fetched one. India already supplies electricity to some neighbours like Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan and Myanmar. But this supply is relatively small. The aim is to expand this to cover the entire Southeast Asia region. Will this idea find takers though? New Delhi is said to be hopeful. The region needs a reliable partner. Earlier, ASEAN nations had mooted a different idea. ASEAN, as you would know, is a regional grouping. 10 Southeast Asian countries are members. Now, they have been discussing a regional power grid, but the idea never really took off. Progress has been limited to just bilateral agreements. There is no regional power grid, no framework to supply to the region as a whole. And why is that? Because these projects are difficult to execute. Setting up grids and power lines is an expensive affair, plus there are transmission costs. I'm talking about the cost of sending power from one place to another. It can be a significant financial burden. So you need a partner with some heft to see this through. And India could be that partner, the answer to Southeast Asia's power woes. But should India go down this route? Should it focus on supplying power overseas when it faces shortages at home? This year, demand for power has shot up in India, and so have shortages. Last month, in the month of June, the average daily shortage was more than 4 gigawatts. For context, in 2022, this number was around 1.5 gigawatts. So the shortages have more than doubled. And 2022 was particularly bad. There was stress on India's power grids. During the months of April and May, India experienced its worst outages in more than 6 years. And remember, India is a developing country, so its power needs will only grow every year. How then will India strike a balance between meeting domestic demand and supplying electricity overseas? Well, there is a plan, we are told. India plans to boost production to increase the supply from renewables and big hydropower stations. Right now, India gets 177 gigawatts worth of power from these sources. By 2030, this is expected to increase to 500 gigawatts. Plus more sources are being added. For example, India is engaged in talks with the UAE. There is a proposal on renewable energy. The plan is to connect the UAE's power grid with India's. If that happens, India and the UAE will be able to exchange power. And how does that work? Through undersea cables. Similar discussions are going on with Saudi Arabia too. Perhaps that's why India feels confident about expanding its supply to Southeast Asia. And of course, it makes diplomatic sense. Such a project, it makes strategic sense also. Such a project will establish India as a key regional player, a major hub for electricity. It will create interdependencies. It will deepen India's ties with Southeast Asia. It is also an effective strategy to counter China. Beijing has made deep inroads in the region. If India can increase its presence, it will keep the dragon in check.